Well, hello there. Really happy you could make it for this webinar on video strategy and video trends. My name is Alexandre Gravel. I'll be spending the next hour with you talking about various considerations we should have in 2019 about video production and video marketing as a whole. So a little bit of housekeeping to start. First up, I wanted to introduce myself and who is Toast Studio. Toast Studio is a content agency based in Montreal, in Canada, and we basically work along four main pillars of the type of work we do. We're about 40 people here we are solely dedicated to content. So everything we do here is content-based. So the four pillars are, the first one being content strategy. So we work with a lot of clients in terms of content strategy, building up the reasoning and the rationale behind the various initiatives that will be carried on in the content program further on. Second one is content production. So we do a lot of content production here. We do video, written content, audio. I'm currently in the studio where we record many of the podcasts that we do, and voiceovers and narrations and so on. Third pillar is really out about content deployment and publishing and amplification. And so it's all about making sure that the content has the performance that the clients and that we want it to have. So it's all about measurement. It's all about making sure that we're reaching the right audiences. We're building those audiences. And the fourth pillar is really a different one, which is basically television production. So we are also a television producers. So we work with traditional broadcasters in creating television IP, television intellectual properties, but we also bring brands to television too, depending on their business objectives. So this is a little bit of housekeeping I wanted to do, and I am one of the founders. We founded, me and my co-founder, we founded the Toast about 20 years ago. So we've been doing this for quite a while, and we're really happy to share what we've learned so far, and especially what's been happening in the video marketing field. So without further ado, I want to start right away and jump on the subject for today that we'll be covering over the next hour. So when I started thinking about how I could build such an hour with you to talk about the trends and where video marketing is going, where video production and video consumption is doing, I started thinking about who should we be producing for and what kind of video consumption trends should we be looking at? And the first thing that came to mind is these guys. This is Justin and Nathan. So Nathan is on the left, Justin's on the right. Nathan is 11 years old, and Justin is 8, and they're my two sons. And basically, they represent for me something we should definitely look at in terms of how video is consumed, how they consume content, and how they approach it. I mean, for them, although I'm not saying that all of our audiences and the people we want to reach with the video marketing we do either as a brand, as a broadcaster, as anything else, is an 8-year-old and an 11-year-old. But in a way, the way they see the world in terms of how content comes to them is something we should definitely consider. I mean, for them, watching video from a YouTuber, watching video that may be coming from a brand, or video that is coming from television broadcaster is pretty much the same. For them, television is basically Netflix, for example. So everything is on demand. Everything is there for them to watch when they want it. And sometimes I often use this example as a funny way of showing how they perceive television and video consumption, is that when I ask them to watch television, I mean watch an actual channel on TV through cable or something like that, for them it's almost as if I was punishing them because they need to watch what someone else decided for them. So this is something we need to consider, and that the way that things are closed, the way the gap is closing between online video and television is extremely important in how, as brands, as broadcasters, as media, we approach video production. One of the main things we need to keep in mind is that really interruption marketing is over. our audiences have the best radar when it comes to trying to figure out when something is an ad. So what we need to do is we need as much as possible. And what Greg David from JWT said, I love this quote. And David Beebe was at Marriott, really brought this along. And when I saw this from him, I fell immediately in love with it. And we need to stop interrupting what consumers are interested in and start becoming what they are interested in. So the way we build our video marketing strategies and the tactics and the initiatives we'll bring to our content marketing program, we need to consider the fact that we want to draw people in. We don't want to interrupt them or push them some video content or video asset that we produce. We want to try and draw them in. Why? Because it will be interesting for them. And that is true in B2C. It is true in B2B. And it's true in B2E also. And what I mean by B2E is business to employee or business to talent is basically corporations now have the same challenges that brands have when they want to reach their employees with corporate messaging and like. So we need to make sure that our message is in the proper format, is of the proper length, is of the proper relevance, and is delivered in the right context. Because what we want to do with content, I mean, when we talk about B2B and B2C, we talk a lot about transactional. We talk a lot about creating business. But with content, and everyone knows that, our goal with video marketing and content marketing is not to drive necessarily directly that transaction, but really to create a relationship between the brand and the audience and its audience. And the way I kind of translated that is that one, for example, we need to make sure that we keep reminding ourselves that from your audience's standpoint, from the standpoint of your consumer, it's a human communicating with another human, even in a B2B context. I mean, you're not necessarily sending a messaging to that corporation. You're sending that message to someone at that corporation who has an influence potential in the buying decision and so on. So you need to make sure that you're keeping in mind the fact that you want to reach humans, and in a way, what works best and when a human reaches another human, that's where the connection is made. But in the end, what we want to create is what I affectionately call BTC. It could be BTB and BTE, changing the 2 for a T, for the letter T. Why? Because what we want to create is trust. We want to create a relationship based on trust between the brand and the consumer, the brand and another business, or the brand, the employer, with the employee. That's what our content needs to do. And the best way to make sure that we can create that relationship, that trust-based relationship, is to ask yourself, how will you help someone today? How will your content help someone do something or become something or spend some time? Because the last thing you want to happen is for someone who's watched your 2-minute, 5-minute, 8-minute video to come back and say, oh boy, that's 2 minutes in my life I'm never going to get back. And when you don't help someone, that's what happens. You waste people's time. So we want to avoid that. So the one thing you need to make sure is that you need to figure out and be aware of where your content falls in this triangle. I mean, content, there are 3 types of content. And if you find a 4th one, please email me. You have my email address because you're part of this webinar. But email me if you have a 4th one. But basically, all content either, and it's an and or relationship. It can be in multiple places at once. Can either inform, educate, which means educate means really that it is content that people will remember. It is something that people will remember in the future so that they can do something or they can perform a given task better. And the 3rd type is entertain. This is actually useful. If your content actually entertains someone at some point in their day when they want to be entertained, well, it's a win for you. So inform, educate, entertain. Those are the 3 types of content that exist. And you can fall somewhere along that white triangle that you see on the screen. Now, I put a red triangle in the middle because what you want to do is really all about making sure that you don't try to be everything at once. Now, Francis, you asked, what about Inspire? Inspire is there, and Inspire could really be, it's more on an emotional aspect. I mean, all content needs to have a functional aspect and an emotional aspect, and it will dictate what that form brings in the end. I think you can have inspirational educational content, inspirational informational content, and inspirational entertainment content. So for me, it's kind of a layer that you add more in the tone, and not necessarily from my point of view, and that's very personal, not necessarily as an objective itself. So there you go. So those are the three types of content that I see on which you can add layers of emotional approach, which Inspire can bring. And this is a discussion we could have further along. If you'd like to, don't hesitate to email me, Francis. Now, a question we're often asked in terms of length and duration of content, especially for video. We don't. You'll often see speakers and keynote speakers have that clip art of the aquarium with the red, the goldfish, and saying that humans do not have the attention level they had in the past, and we have the attention level of a goldfish, which is about 8 seconds. Now, if that is true, which I don't believe at all, why do we not have 30 seconds to watch an ad? So we all agree on that. We just want to skip those ads on YouTube. We know it. But we have 30 minutes for a great story. I mean, we can binge watch House of Cards in one weekend. That, for me, is to have a high attention level. So when the content is good, in the right context, at the right time, and being on demand helps a lot, I mean, we have the attention level of an elephant. No, I'm making this up. But we are able to spend some time with a brand, with a property, with content, if it's good. So that's really important. This brings us to, and everything which I just mentioned is true for content marketing on a general level. Now, in terms of video specifically, I brought some stats from a couple of recent studies. Now, that source, WizOwl, is a real source. It's not, I didn't sneeze on my keyboard. Just making a joke here. But what was interesting in there is that 82% of marketing teams plan to spend more on video this year. So video is there, video is coming along. We just need to do it properly, because we see so many brands, and even here we see brands coming in at Toast. We see so many brands for whom video was not a success. It cost a lot, it was complex, it was not fun, and in the end, there was no performance behind it. So we need to make sure that it's done properly. One of the studies I like a lot, and the Content Marketing Institute has been doing that one for a couple of years now, for many years actually now. They do one for B2C and do one for B2B, and this comes off from the 2017 B2C study. The 2018. The 2019 is not out yet. That's what I meant. So the B2C study, and they always ask marketers. They basically survey C-level and marketing executives in terms of their content marketing initiatives. And one of the first questions they ask is, do you consider your brand or your team or your corporation to be successful in doing content marketing? Or do you figure that you're maybe a little less successful than what you would want to be? And basically what's interesting is when they start putting the tactics that both of these types of marketers, or the way that marketers feel about their programs, put in those two buckets, we start to see differences between how they approach and what they do. And what you have here in the middle row here, that light orange, is basically what do the most successful marketing executives or marketing teams do in terms of content marketing. And we see that social media is there, of course, but we see that video pre-produced, so we're excluding live on that, they do that. That's the second most common tactic that they put in place. And the third one is illustration photos. So why I wanted to show you this, and because of the third row, that darker orange, is what do the least successful content marketers do. Social media posts is also there, so everyone does that. That's fine. But then you notice that video is not there. So the least successful content marketers do not do video that much. So can we kind of conclude that video is part of a successful content marketing strategy? I would like to say so. Second graph I wanted to show you about the same, is that the same study? No, that's the B2B, 2019 B2B. So these are very recent numbers, but in terms of B2B. So it's still relevant for B2C, but I wanted to touch on both. In orange, what you see is the proportion of content marketers that say that their budgets for that specific tactic will increase. In blue is the budget will stay the same, the proportion of content marketers that say the budget will stay the same. And in gray is the proportion of content marketers that say they will their budget will decrease. So when we look at that last one, decrease, you'll see that 17%, that last row, of content marketers mentioned that they will be decreasing their written print content budgets. That something we're not necessarily too surprised about with everything going to digital, especially in B2B also. This is really something that we're not too surprised about. And the first one, where we will see the people that will, the highest proportion of content marketers that will raise their budgets, it's in terms of audiovisual content. So that would be video, live streaming, webinars, and the like. So you see that it's really a trend that's not stopping. Budgets are increasing, success seems to be there, and really video is part of a successful content strategy. Media buys, media and dollars that are being put behind video productions is also increasing, 30% growth in the last year. That's huge. And I always like to bring in that little stat from Cisco, which they update on a yearly basis, which basically says that, well, in 3 years, almost all of the internet traffic will be video based. I mean, it's a big thing, and what that means, of course, video is much more heavier in terms of bandwidth than a regular blog article or an infographic. But it's always a nice stat to look at. I mean, 3 years ago they were saying that today would be about 79%, and now 3 years from now it's going to be 82. So it's about 1% per year. But that stat from Cisco is always something that I find interesting. But there's a downside to that, because almost 2/3 of marketing teams feel that, well, and they are right, video is a little more complex to produce than what you would require in terms of man hours and effort if you're doing a blog article or a photo shoot or even just an infographic. So that's something you need to consider. But then again, if success is there, if it's done properly, the performance is there, let's do it. So I'm gonna move along in the next maybe 40 minutes with some kind of a potpourri of various things to consider in your content marketing strategy. The first one being that for your audience, more and more, the gap between digital video that they will watch online and watching television is nearing. What that means is that for them, there shouldn't be any difference, and they don't perceive a big difference between watching a television production or watching a brand's production on a digital channel. For them, it's pretty much the same thing. I mean, us as marketers and broadcasters and people in media, we know that very often today it's being produced in a whole different way. It's a whole different budget. But for your audience, it's no different. So you need to consider that. Do you need to do your brand productions at the budget of a large Game of Thrones episode? Of course not. But just keep that in mind. It could bring something to mind. It could bring something different to your production. And one thing that is that I wanted to show you guys is, well, this is about one of the most complex graphics I've ever seen. I'm sure there's a way to better put it on, but that's the way it was. So those 4 rectangles are basically quarters in a year. Quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, quarter 4. And the lines the vertical bands in it are basically years. So every quarter contains the past 5 years. What I wanted to show you is that last red vertical line in the third quarter, which is basically Q3 2018, which is just a couple months ago, which means that was July, August, and September. And what you see on there, and that graph represents the number of people that canceled their subscription to cable. So basically, or satellite television. But basically, we saw the biggest drop, or the biggest number of people that canceled their cable or satellite membership in the Q3 of 2018. What does that mean? I mean, we've all heard about cable cutting. That's not new. It's there. As you can see, it's rising, or actually the number of people that are subscribed to traditional cable or satellite is decreasing very rapidly. But what that means that these people are not necessarily going to be watching less video than they were, or audiovisual content or television that they were, but they'll be switching to other platforms. They'll be switching to other places. So basically, for a lot of these people, it becomes time that they have available to watch video on digital platforms. And that's where I was saying that that gap between television and digital video is closing in, is soon it's going to be, everything's going to be consumed on digital platforms. So that means that your video content that you're producing as a marketer will not necessarily need to be on par in terms of budget, as I was mentioning, but you need to consider that the time that people are spending with you is time that they might have been spending on TV. So treat that with respect. Make sure you don't waste their time, and keep considering that in every single one of your production. So from then on, I'm going to show you a good number of examples of things and examples of how content marketing initiatives were done. The first one I want to tell you about is about niche markets. Niche markets is really that ability with digital platforms, with targeting, with surgical targeting, to be able to target and discover niche markets. And this is one of the things that Skyship, they're based in Toronto, did when they built Carl's Car Wash, which is a series for children. And what they did, they basically looked at YouTube trends, looked at what was being consumed in terms of video, in terms of content, what was being searched for, and they basically produced a series that was exactly for a specific type of child that watched a specific type of video. So I'll show you part of an episode, and then I'll tell you more what you just saw.
As soon as I drop off these tomatoes, I'll head straight to Carl's Car Wash. Hey, Carl.
Hey, Betty.
I'm here for a wash.
Okay. What type of vehicle is Betty driving? Is it a car? Is it a van? Is it a tomato truck? Yes! It's a tomato truck. Let's see how messy that truck is.
All right. So what you saw just there is a truck that gets dirty, that goes to the car wash. And why did Skyship create Carl's Car Wash? Because they noticed that on YouTube, children, and many children, watched a lot and binge watched and rewatched videos of car washes, of cars getting into a car wash, being clean, and so on. So they created that for a specific niche. Now, of course, that's not necessarily exactly what you can do as a brand, but this is an example of how to figure out a trend and surf on it. One other thing that you need to consider when thinking about niche markets is the fact that, and this is a stat that comes from the B2B markets, but there's a similar stat that exists in the B2C market. But in the B2B market, when you make a sale, on average, there will be about 6.8 people that will have been involved in the decision. So in a way, you have to influence almost 7 people to make sure that you get the sale in B2B. So you'll need to produce content that caters to every single one of these people on an ideal level. That might not always be possible, but when you can, this is something that can be extremely relevant. Now, an example I have on that is a documentary, 25-minute doc that Norton created. Now, Norton is the antivirus company that we all know. You might have an antivirus software on your computer that comes from Norton. But what Norton is basically also an enterprise security service company. So they offer enterprise level security services to large corporations. And when you make a sale for that, which might be a multi-million-dollar sale, you'll need to influence a lot of people in that company. There's the CFO, might be the CEO, of course there's a COO, but there's one guy or girl that you also need to influence, and it's that person who's in the basement with on their desk that tower of cans of Red Bull, and it's the IT person, the in-house geek, that person that knows every single thing that you always go to when you want a recommendation on what to buy, what to do, and how to solve a problem. Now, what they did, they produced that 25-minute documentary that basically took an investigative reporter and sent him around the world to visit and discover rogue data centers. So data centers where you have all those servers. Well, there are data centers in the world that are the places where spammers and hackers and cybercrime happens. And they created this content specifically for the geek in some of us. And in a way, it goes to show how Norton understands the geek that can work at those large enterprises, and they now have content that they can send to them to try and influence the decision, making sure that Norton's on the right side of the decision for that. So I'll show you a little clip of it, and then we'll move on.
There are kingdoms and companies that are the Switzerlands of the internet. These are data havens, and the information they host on the servers only they have access to are amongst the most secure, impenetrable, and inaccessible places on Earth. Some of these kingdoms and companies offer cybercriminals the privacy to conduct illegal information exchanges, malware attacks, spam dumps, ransomware breaches, and bulletproof hosting. Criminals have walked these halls, here today, gone tomorrow, emerging outside the reach of law enforcement and between international legislations. We're visiting some of the most dangerous places on the internet to find out where cybercrime goes to hide. We're flying over the north.
So you saw how the way the documentary is built. It's really there to. It really focuses on those data centers, and if you watch it completely, there's a lot of talk about tech stuff, and so it's not there for the CFO. It was not produced for the COO. It was really produced for the geek that works in those companies that Norton might be targeting, or for whom Norton might be renewing their service contract. So this is the type of niche content and video content that you can produce. Now, moving along, second one I wanted to show you, second example, is really all about passion and community. So it's not necessarily building a community where there'll be conversations and so, but really figuring out what kind of content I can produce that will satisfy and cater and fuel the passion that some members have of my client base. And an interesting example is the series called Welcome to My Cab that Volvo Trucks did. Now, when they created that series, they basically wanted to target truckers. So the Volvo trucks are those big, huge trucks, and Welcome to My Cab is really portraits of those truckers, and when you can visit their cab, visit their truck, and really it was produced for a specific community and a niche market. So I'll let you watch a little clip of it.
Hello, this is Miriam.
This is John.
This is Mazzy.
Welcome to our cab.
We got into trucking
On accident.
on accident. We wanted to travel. We wanted to spend all of our time together.
Yep.
And it definitely fits the bill for both of those. We had planned to do it for a year. Here we are 14 years later.
We both like driving.
Both
so that
like
helps.
driving.
I'm good for traffic in big cities. And he's like, he can get in and out of anything.
Accounting, business and accounting department, maintenance, and
Everything else department.
as far as I know, we're the only V&L style Volvo in North America that runs the 20,000-pound steer.
So yeah, I'll have to interrupt this clip, but I can tell you when I discovered this series, I binge watched about 3 episodes. It's a great thing to watching the passion of these people, and really then again, once again here, what Volvo Trucks wanted to do is really to promote how passionate their customers are and their drivers, the people that drive their trucks are. So this is what really all about passion. The second series, the next example I wanted to show you is all about social video. And I use the term social video not because that video was published on a social media platform, but because really the audience can interact with it. So it's very often something that is done live. For example, what we have here is something that Old Spice produced and distributed and aired on Twitch live. And really what you can see on the screenshot here is that there is a 6-hour stream of a roll of toilet paper, a box of Kleenex, and a toothbrush playing King of the Mountain live, which could be influenced by the audience. There were some multiple challenges throughout the live stream. There was a foam zone. There was all sorts of things. All that, and you might be wondering what's the tie-in with Twitch? Well, it was really a tie-in with sports in this case, live sports. So they had live color commentator and sports commentators that were on board and really commenting what was happening. And the reason Old Spice chose Twitch is because they wanted to reach a younger audience, a younger demographic. So they keep trying to target. And they keep targeting, and they do it very well. They keep targeting those younger demographics with their products, so that they can get adoption early on from new customers and new consumers. And Twitch was the right platform to do that kind of thing. So that's what they did, and it worked extremely well. Another example, personalized video. This is something that more and more brands will be able to do. And the example I wanted to show you is was done by Anthem Blue Cross. Now, in the insurance industry, one of the main problems that exist is that when you onboard a new person, a new client, a new customer, it's always very complex, and we've all lived it. I mean, you'll be receiving a card by mail. You'll be receiving an email that says create an account on the website. There'll be all these communications that comes from all these channels, and it's sometimes a little bit complicated to figure out exactly in the end what have I gotten into. It will require some calls, some reading, and so on. So what they did is they created an introduction video, an onboarding video that is personalized for every single member. So let me show you what I mean by that, and then you'll realize how customized that video is for that person.
Hey Monica, welcome back to Anthem Blue Cross. Thank you for choosing us. We made this video just for you to explain the basics of your new plan. Let's get started. On the 15th of this month, you and your family can start using your health plan, which includes pharmacy, dental, and vision coverage. Did you know that doctors and hospitals in our network agree to give discounts to our members? So you save money on your healthcare when you use them. Your new plan does not include coverage for doctors who are outside your network. We noticed you haven't selected your primary care physician yet. This is the doctor you'll see for checkups, routine care, and referrals. You can use the Find a Doctor tool on Anthem.com or our mobile app to find a doctor or hospital near you.
So you've seen in that video how much customization there is to make sure that it's very personal and very individual for that person's specific situation. And they did that extremely well with a platform called Sunday Sky, which might be interesting looking into if you're in a field where that type of onboarding can be sometimes fairly complex. So this is an example of very individual, personal, and video personalization. Next, not necessarily trend, but thing to consider is mobile video. Now, this is the rise of mobile up to early 2018. You see how that rise is nonstop, and phone video consumption is on the rise. So people are watching video content on those small screens, and really, what I want to do by mentioning this, I want to make sure that you always consider the fact that about 60% of the people that are going to watch your videos are going to be watching it on a less than ideal screen, which might be a small tablet or even a phone, a mobile phone. So are you considering what it looks like on those platforms, on that type of screen? When you do approve video content from your agency, make sure that you not only watch it on your computer, but watch it on a phone. Look at how the text on the screen looks like. Do the shots and the video render well on a smaller screen. Make sure that the experience is going to be perfect on every single type of screen. And how you do that? By make sure you watch it on all types of screen. And I wanted to show you this photo of a sound studio, of a music studio. Now, what do you notice in a music studio like this one? Well, you got those huge speakers in the back that the mixer and the producer will be using when they're creating the song or creating the mix for the next feature film or that television show. But you'll notice those two smaller speakers in the front that are white. Those are the small speakers that people usually have at home. They're called reference speakers, and they're fairly flat, and then they have a whole different frequency response than the big ones. But you always have that in a sound studio. Why? Because you want to make sure that you're producing music that sounds good on your speakers, but you want to make sure that that same song will sound well when people plays it on the radio in the kitchen or in their car or somewhere else. So do the same thing with your video. Make sure that you watch it on multiple screens to make sure that the experience for your audience will be as good as possible. Moving along, vertical video, that famous type of video that we don't like so much as video producers and television producers, but hey, it's there. People do switch their screens, but they will usually start watching any type of video vertically when they're on mobile. So if it's relevant and the stories, Instagram stories and Facebook stories and Snapchat and so on are there to prove it, if it's relevant and the context is right, why not do vertical video? This is Gender Derby, is a web series that was produced in France for IRL, and it was shot entirely vertically. And it's not a horizontal production that they cropped, it really was shot vertically. And when you look at production photos, you see that they actually turn the camera sideways to shoot the entire picture. Consider it. Just keep it in mind. Not everyone likes it, but sometimes it can be relevant for some types of productions. Now, stories. I just mentioned it. Great example of stories. It is an example by the New York Public Library. So this example is really something that you should keep in mind. It's a great way to leverage the power of Instagram stories, but same thing goes for Facebook stories. So I'll let you watch this example. So you saw how powerful they really leveraged how stories work and the whole way those platforms are built. Great example. Have a look at it. If the stories come back on a regular basis, I believe, on their various social channels. Next one is context. Making sure that the video you produce is produced for the right context. This is an example of a fashion brand that has a great video marketing strategy, ASOS. Now, ASOS, what they do is that the context on their YouTube channel is, of course, very different from when someone is actually on their e-commerce site. So what they do is that on the YouTube channel, they have longer content that talks about trends, that talks about new releases, but doesn't really talk about, it talks about lifestyle of the type of brand they are. And tutorials and the like, but really what they want to do is not talk too much about the product. The context when someone is on YouTube watching video is not necessarily there. They're not necessarily there to buy right away. They're there to be inspired. They're there to be to learn something, to be educated in something, informed about what's coming up. So that's the reason that they have the context of their YouTube channel is so different that they created these types of video. Now, on their website, if you visit their website, every single product has video on it. And what kind of video it has? No trends, no tutorials. It really has the product itself. So context, they really exploit the whole basis of context extremely well, where you can see the product up close, moving, see how it falls, how that shirt looks like, how those pants look like. So really, they're doing a great job in maximizing context between their website, their e-commerce site, and their YouTube channel. Now, we're talking a lot about producing content, but not every single piece of video content needs to be original. What you can also do is optimize what you've done in the past. And there are many ways to reuse, recycle, and optimize the content you have. This is an example where understood what they did is that they basically added a link to the most relevant page from their website in the description, in the YouTube description of all their videos. And that actually drove organic traffic to their website. So they could actually leverage that video that they had published in the past and trying to drive more traffic to their website. There's all sorts of optimizations that you can do. So don't always think about producing new video. Sometimes it could be republishing a video from the past year if it's still relevant this year. You'll reach a new audience with it. And there's a good chance that you will not alienate anyone that saw it in the year before. So think about that. Think about what you have and think about how you could optimize it. Now, another one interesting thing to consider is the curiosity gap. Now, this is if you do a Google search for that, you'll find great videos that explain how the curiosity gap works. But in short, what it does is that when you can induce curiosity into the person that is watching a video, that person will watch that video for longer, because they want to find the answer to what you just put on the table. So if you can create that gap where what I want to know and what I will eventually know, you can start working on creating more retention in your videos. Now, you must make sure that you not stretch this too far, because if the reward at the end is not big enough, you have a problem. People will have wasted their time. And that's really all about what I was mentioning before. When people feel that they have wasted their time, it's because something was too long and there was too small a reward at the end. So examples of the curiosity gap. The first one is a 15-second example, but you could find longer example, of course, but I don't want to have something a little too long here. But it's from a retailer that's called Ukes. And what they did, they created a 15-second pre-roll. That, for me, exemplifies what the curiosity gap is. You want to know what will happen at the end. So you saw how throughout those 15 seconds you wanted to know what would happen at the end to that code on the right. Well, you don't know because you created the curiosity gap and you want to know even more potentially to click. So that's how they built the scenario and the script for this 15-second. Now, another example of the curiosity gap is what IKEA did with their unskippable ads. They created a series of those, and this is one example. Let me show you a clip, and then we'll talk about it.
Ska du verkligen kolla på det här? Du vet att du kan hoppa över det här. Det här kommer ta jättelång tid.
Yep, the guy comes back, continues to do the dishes, and nothing happens. I mean, the curiosity gap is there because you want to know what's going to happen at the end. And so let me tell you, after those 4 minutes, 30 seconds, nothing happens. The guy finishes the dishes and goes away. And the reward is like, okay, that was entertaining. So that's an interesting example of the curiosity gap. Don't exploit it too much in this way, because if you have nothing at the end, this could do damage to your brand. It didn't for IKEA because they get the highest completion rates for their pre-roll ads that they ever had, but it's a fun play on that curiosity gap. Another thing that can actually hinder your video performance is something we noticed in one of our productions that we did for a TV show that aired last fall. You see that little drop in retention at about a minute into the sketch. Now we wanted to know what happened there. So we zoomed in and we started looking at what's happening in the script. And what happened in the script for this specific video sketch and video skit is that at that point, in 1 minute of the 2 minute 30 seconds roughly of long that it was, at that point, at 1 minute, we discovered the punch. Part of the punch of the line of the comedy aspect of that video, we discovered what it was. And that made a drop in retention because people felt, oh, okay, now I get it. I know where this is going. I'm leaving. So the curiosity gap at that point, we kind of broke it in a way. So you might want to look at your video performance on a regular basis to see if you're not doing those type of things. Or if at some point during a video, people feel that they're wasting their time. They don't see a reward at the end, so they're not staying, so they're dropping. So make sure you keep in mind to have a look at your video performance and the video retention through time. Pretty much all platforms allow you to have access to that information. So direct response. Very often you'll say that in a video, let's not have a call to action. Video is all about building trust. It's about creating that relationship. Well, if you can detect intention, do have a call to action. This is an example from Google where if you have a search engine SEM, search engine marketing strategy that allows you to detect when someone is really close to buying those piano lessons. If you have a video about piano lessons, have a call to action on there that says either test, learn more, shop. Really try to bring that person as quickly as possible to you because you detected prior on that their intention was to buy. So intention is extremely important. When you can detect it, try to leverage it into something like what you have on the screen. Education. People are willing to spend content educating themselves to be better at stuff. And Lowe's does this extremely well with their YouTube channel, where you'll have all sorts of tutorials on how to install wood flooring, how to prep your wall for a new type of paint. All those tutorials are there to allow you to be better at what you do, at the task that you want to do. So make sure that you consider this also for your brand where you're producing content. There are things that people are willing to spend their time on, and this time with you if you provide them with the right experience at the right time. A thing that they did also on their YouTube channel is create a series called The Weekender. The Weekender is a series, your regular home improvement series that you'll have on TV. They created that because they created those half hours where someone will do a project throughout a weekend, and this is actually a project that you could do at home. So I'll show you a bit more about what I mean by that, and you'll notice how close it is to something that you'd see on TV, but it's actually on their YouTube channel.
I'm Monica Mangan, and I believe that updating your home doesn't have to take a ton of time or money. I show people how to get Pinterest-worthy spaces that are just right for them.
This doesn't even look like our house.
Are you kidding? Give me 1 weekend, I'll give you 5 projects, and you'll have a completely transformed space by Monday.
So another great example of how we can see that people are willing to spend time when you're willing to teach them stuff is masterclass.com. If you haven't been there, go have a look. It's great. Masterclass.com is basically a platform when you have those celebrities that will basically be teaching you their craft. So you'll have Gordon Ramsay teaching you how to cook, and basic kitchen technique. You'll have Hani Leibovitz teaching you how to do photography. And you'll have, like this example, which is Martin Scorsese teaching you how to make a film.
If you're intrigued by movie making as a career, this isn't the class for you. But if you need to make movies, if you feel like you can't rest until you've told this particular story that you're burning to tell, then I could be speaking to you. If you don't get physically ill seeing your first rough cut, something's wrong. You always think you're not going to get physically ill, but you do. People think it's good editing if you can see it. Good editing is something else too.
So there you have it. I mean, spending 4, 6 to 8 hours, and that's the type of course that they're putting online, the people at masterclass.com. I mean, spending 4 hours with Martin Scorsese, looking you directly in the eye and teaching you his craft, teaching you what he learned is an extremely wonderful experience. And they're doing this very well. So people are willing to spend time with you, with your brand, when you are bringing value. Next example is something, and we actually did something with the National Bank of Canada with entrepreneurs here in Quebec called Alias Entrepreneur, and it was really a great experience, really building those hours of video content that allows young entrepreneurs to learn about what they need to know, and a little more about how they can bring their company and their idea to the next level. Moving along. Back to basics. That was a trend that I found extremely interesting when I was doing my research for this. Is basically, and this stat really popped on my screen and I loved it, 70% growth. Currently, there's 70% growth month over month, or actually year over year. I'm not sure exactly. That's from Google, actually. That is spent watching relaxing videos. So people are willing to spend time with you, with your content, if you can entertain them in the relaxing way and in the right context at the right time, of course. One example that Google was mentioning in their research for that is this channel. If you haven't seen it, it's called Primitive Technology, and it's basically these guys that are building things, a pool, water treatment installation, but as if we were 3,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago, before we had electricity, before we had anything. So I'll show you a clip and you'll see exactly what I mean by that. Let me just pull it up. It's extremely interesting. And those videos last maybe an hour, sometimes maybe an hour and a half. They skip through it, but it's always very calm. And there's always the notion of being patient. Things will come in the end. You see how relaxing it is. No narration, no voiceover, just real life. And I mean, I'm learning something, but it's relaxing at the same time. So I don't know. I found the combination of the two extremely interesting. And that brings us basically to nostalgia. Nostalgia works very well, and you'll see all those ads that are being shared on Facebook and all over the place about bringing us back in time in a way. Primitive technology does this, and this is an example of something we did for one of our clients, where basically their Kamek is a manufacturer of boots and sandals for kids and women, and men also. They have some products for men. But basically, what they wanted to do is create a campaign that in the end is called Free or Play, which is basically brings us back to the time when we were young and we would just go outside and play without any direction and any instructions. It's just like, okay, children, go outside, go play, come back in 4 hours for supper, for dinner. And really, our goal with this was really to tap into that and really bring those feelings that we felt when we were young and how it affects us today and our own children.
Long time no see, eh? I grew up on a farm, and I would bring my friends over here and we'd play on the farm.
We were biking down to the park, and there was like a little forest, and we could spend all day playing outside.
My best memory of playing outside as a child, just playing football, tearing up lawns and just having a good time.
Rainy days, and we'd come back, we'd be covered in mud. It was some of the best days ever.
We would build tree houses. It would make me feel free, as if I was taking risks and pushing the limits, pushing the boundaries to explore and go a little bit further every time.
We played outside when we were kids, all the time.
Every day.
So you see how we wanted to bring the current generation back to its roots in a way, and how it was when we were a little younger, and how that felt good. So it was all about feeling good and making sure that we're bringing back to basics, and primitive technology, things like what we did with Kamek does that. Another thing that I found interesting from Google, still basically in the same study, 84% of soccer fans on YouTube say they watch past World Cups or other soccer games. So going back to something from the past really brings something emotionally to all of us, to each and every one of you. So whenever you can, as a brand, as a broadcaster, as a media, tap into this. It can really resonate extremely well with your audience. So that's something to think about. And moving along for those last 2 minutes, beyond 800 words is really something from the BBC Research and Development Department. If you have a chance, do a Google search on those and go to the websites. They have a lot of examples on how they're doing R&D in terms of how we could improve storytelling, how could we adapt storytelling to various audiences, and they're sharing prototypes, and they're sharing their results, and what works, what doesn't. And really, if you have a chance, spend some time there. It can give you great ideas on how to leverage a video for your brand, your media, or your own television channel. And finally, I want to close on that. Basically, have empathy. And that's really one of the main things that you can do, is basically have empathy for the audience that you're producing video for. I can never say this enough. Put yourself in their shoes, talk to them, ask them, show them what you plan on producing, and really do your best to try and be there for them. And this is how you will create that connection, that trust that I was mentioning. So this brings us, I'm sorry, to the end. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for spending time with us. All the people here at TELUS are really happy that you spent time with us on this. Don't hesitate to email me directly, gravel@gotoast.ca, or click on the link that you see for the workbook. Come and download our workbook that basically takes you the entire process of building your content strategy. Our goal is really to support you and making sure that you produce the best content for your audience. So until next time, I wish you a great day, and thank you very much for having been there.